Maybe I'm in a midlife crisis. I recently got my first tattoo with my daughter. I'm living out of a suitcase, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. After decades of running study abroad programs in eco-villages and educating around climate change, I know I want to help create a world that is more regenerative, meaningful, and just. I'm just not sure how. So, when a friend described a recent life-changing and blissful experience she had in an ayahuasca ceremony, an age-old psychedelic vision quest, I said, "Sign me up." A few weeks later, I gathered with 8 other seekers in a basement in Ann Arbor, and after drinking the first cup of nasty-tasting psychoactive brew around 9 p.m., I laid on my mat and thought about this great turning that humanity seems to be in. From a dying old story of separation to an emerging new story of our fundamental interdependence with each other and all life. I offered a prayer to be shown the truth and how I can best serve in this time of global unraveling and awakening. Be careful what you wish for. After an hour or two, I heard others laughing, crying, and purging, which is a common and often cleansing part of the experience. But I felt nothing, so I drank a second cup when offered, and then a third, and then it started. I found myself dreaming into the pain of the world: rainforest destruction, climate chaos, mass extinctions, social injustice. When the world's pain suddenly became my pain, I felt it all over my body, and then it all compressed into my heart like a star collapsing into a black hole. To even call it pain didn't do it justice. It was the infinite abyss, pure agony, unbearable suffering. It was beyond emotion. Despair and horror and grief felt secondary to this experience, like shockwaves after a nuclear explosion. And I was at ground zero. I just wanted to get away from it, to make it stop. My mind, surprisingly, was working fine. And I thought, maybe if I purge, I can release this misery, this toxin from my body, and then experience the bliss I was seeking. I hunched like an angry cat over the bucket next to my mat, but only dry heaved, which felt even worse. I remembered our guide showing a jar of chewing tobacco and explaining how smearing a bit on my gums might stimulate a purge. But at that moment, our guide was singing, let it be," which I begrudgingly took as a sign to not interfere with the process. It then dawned on me that I asked to be shown the truth. And the truth is the world is suffering a lot. It's not something that will disappear by my throwing up. I thought of Thich Nhat Hanh's plea to not turn away from suffering. Purging so that I might feel better felt selfish and like a spiritual bypass. So I let it be. For the next 6 hours, my heart felt like it was dying, and every uncontrollable dry heave felt like a silent scream. The oceans were screaming. The polar bears were screaming. My children's children were screaming, all through me. I even felt the recently deceased Ruth Bader Ginsburg screaming from her grave. It just went on and on. At this point, I couldn't make it stop even if I wanted to. All I could do was be a vessel, a visceral embodiment of the world's immense suffering. As dawn finally approached, The agony receded, and then the tears came, eyes swollen. I was overcome by grief and despair and loss. I'm not sure I ever experienced such sadness. But there was something else, too. Even in the depths of my despair, I had a sense of trust and certainty that a more beautiful world is emerging. I imagined this moment in planetary history like the transition phase of birth, when the baby's head is crowning and the perineum has stretched to such limits that it's often called the ring of fire. It's a time of confusion and pain when things seem impossible. But it is also when the midwife feels relief and excitement, knowing this is completely natural and that the baby will soon be nursing in its mother's arms. I realized we can't avoid the world's pain. We have to go through it. We have to cry out for all the suffering and injustice and loss of life. We have to welcome our confusion and our fear. We have to build our resilience and compassion and care for the tearing of the very fabric of our being. And we have to slow down and be fully present to the birth of this new being, an interbeing, a collective consciousness and a sense of unity with everything and everyone. I want to be a midwife to this birth. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life.